It's that time again. It's Baggy Hi-Fi time. Greetings cats and kittens, welcome once again to another episode of Baggy Hi-Fi, this YouTube channel devoted to record collecting and the vinyl community here in the UK. If you're new to this channel, then new Baggy Hi-Fiers are always welcome. How are you all keeping? I've been quite busy lately. I still have to work, but I have to also spend quite a lot more time at home. So it's taken me a while to make this new video, but this new video is a response to a thread going around on the vinyl community on YouTube, and it was begun by Rachel the Music Mam over in Canada, and her channel is a real delight. It's been a great discovery for me. Rachel is a massive Beatles fan. That's very evident from the first video that you watch of her, but she's also an Anglophile as well. She loves all things English and British, I guess, as well, and she's been over to the UK. Her latest video, she was talking, it was very interesting, about her family connection with Port Merion in Wales, you know, that village that was featured in the Prisoner TV series. So I do recommend, if you haven't already subscribed to Rachel the Music Mam's channel, then I think you should. So hi Rachel. As I said, this is a VC thread that I'm following in this video, and the theme is 10 favourite vocal performances on vinyl, if possible. Not all of them are, actually, one is a CD. Now, vocal performances makes you sort of think, in classical terms, would be, you know, a recital, and requires, you know, a special technique and following the script in front of you, the musical notation. But it's different in pop and rock music. The voice is very much connected in with the rest of the sound, and you don't have to be a technically great singer to have a good vocal performance. And some of the singers I'm going to talk about in this video, I wouldn't say are technically great. So you'll discover as we go on through the 10. So without further ado, let's get on with the first choice. The late, great Roky Erickson, who sadly died last May. Roky Erickson from Texas formed the 13th Floor Elevators in about 1965-66. Celebrated acid rock psychedelic band. But Roky, despite there being many great psych bands of the 60s, is a great vocalist. I think he has a very distinctive style, very soulful singing style, and he made lots and lots of great records after the 13th Floor Elevators. But I thought I would choose something from their first album, The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor Elevators, released on International Artists in 1966. And the hit single, I think it was a hit single, You're Gonna Miss Me. But some of the howls and the screams on this, it's just an impassioned performance by Roky. This copy of their first album is a double with a mono and a stereo mix, and this should be in everyone's collection, I think. But then I am a bit biased. So there we are. The late great Roky Erickson with You're Gonna Miss Me. David Bowie, very much an original and an innovator, but at the same time a borrower of music styles as well, and managed to draw influences from all over the place and make them his own. I think that's probably one of the pluses with David, that he went through so many changes, to quote a song title of his. Yeah, I could have picked lots and lots of tunes for great vocal performances from David Bowie. But I decided to go for this album in the end. I think one of his best, Station to Station, 1976, I think, or 75, 76. Perfect album, just 6 tracks. If you added another track onto it, it wouldn't add any more to it. It just seemed to be such a symmetrical album, and great songs all the way through. Great vocal performances as well. This is a Thin White Duke period. after making The Man Who Fell to Earth, and this is a still from the film The Man Who Fell to Earth, as many of you will know. And the song I've chosen is Word on a Wing. I think, in a sense, Bowie lets the mask drop in this performance, and it seems to be very passionate. He seems to be speaking out some sort of yearning for God, or it's definitely a spiritual song. A great performance, slightly over the top, but just about doesn't go over the top. Great performance. Word on a Wing, last track on side 1 on Station to Station. And on to my next choice for vocal performances, Nico, the late Nico. She died at the age of 49. Came to a rather sad ending as a junkie in Manchester, of all places. But as you probably know, Nico began her life she was born in Germany, in Cologne, and was spotted and she became a model and also an actress. I think she starred in one of the Fellini films. And then she hooked up with the Velvet Underground in New York with Andy Warhol, and of course she's featured on that classic album, Velvet Underground and Nico. Her first solo album is called Chelsea Girl, and I think most people agree that it is a beautiful album. Lots of cover versions on it, Bob Dylan, Jackson Browne, orchestrated. But apparently Nico just really wasn't happy with it. And she chose to dismantle the the beautiful blonde model look, and went in for dark hair and started writing her own songs, which have a very gothic bent to them. And she developed this singing style, which is not only very Germanic but also very medieval. The songs are drony. She plays the harmonium, and on the 2 albums, which I think are her best, The Marble Index and the follow-up Desert Shore. Desert Shore is probably the best or my favourite out of the 2. This is 1969. And of those 2 albums, John Cale does all of the arrangements, and the very atmospheric, very bizarre, clanging pianos and percussion and viola as Nico drones away on her harmonium, singing in this very distinctive vocal style. Lyrics very elusive, very evocative. And the song I've chosen, or the performance I've chosen, is Frozen Warnings on this very short album. 4 minutes of Nico. Don't really know what she's singing about, but it's wonderful. And the backing is John Cale's viola, very droning viola, and it sounds like he's feeding Nico's harmonium through maybe some sort of effects or a Leslie speaker. So yeah, this is a great album, The Marble Index by Nico, and a great performance on the song Frozen Warnings. Iggy Pop. I wanted to include Iggy because I do think he is a very good singer. He's made many solo albums, some of them not very good. Probably best known for his time in the very influential band The Stooges. And those first 2 Stooges albums, the one from 1969 and the one Funhouse, are rightly acclaimed as classics. But this is the first album I ever heard by Iggy. Iggy and the Stooges, Raw Power, I think it's from 1973. Yeah. James Williamson plays guitar on this one. And the track I've chosen for a great performance, I nearly chose Search and Destroy because that's such a snotty punk tune. But the track I went for in the end is Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell. And the actual song sounds a bit like the Stones, in 70s style Stones. But the Rolling Stones never sounded this nasty and petulant and punk. So yeah, Iggy gives this performance his all. extreme screeching, especially towards the end of the song, and it's a real nasty rock and roll workout. So yeah, Iggy Pop, James Osterberg, giving it his all on Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell, originally titled Hard to Beat. So Bryan Ferry, or Byron Ferrari as the New Musical Express used to mockingly call that singer from the Roxy Music. I could have chosen a song from one of Bryan Ferry's many solo albums where he does a lot of cover versions, but they are fairly patchy, although despite some good performances on there. But I decided to pick a tune from one of the early Roxy Music albums, For Your Pleasure, 1973, their second album. Nice copy I have here. I'm very proud owner of this album, and it is a wonderful record. Bryan Ferry is something of a contradiction, really, because his singing style is so artificial. It's obviously based on crooners of the 30s and 40s, that kind of warbly, over the topness that Ferry became so well known for. And don't forget that Bryan Ferry comes from that fine art background of being tutored by Richard Hamilton in the great English pop artist. So in a sense, Roxy Music were one of the first sort of postmodern groups because they had that distanced irony, which didn't really exist in pop music before them. It was all about authenticity before them, and Roxy Music brought in that love of artifice. So yeah, but the contradiction, I think, in Bryan Ferry's singing style is that despite it being a really artificial style, it manages to convey emotion. This song, Beauty Queen, is Bryan's hymn to looking at a woman, and he's obviously besotted. She seems to be unattainable, someone who is going to become a star, possibly. And it's a really emotional song, and that's the performance I've picked by Bryan Ferry, Beauty Queen from For Your Pleasure. The Godlike Genius of Scott Walker. Well, that was the title of a compilation of some of Scott Walker's late 60s solo material that Julian Cope put together in the early 80s. And Julian Cope, you can see he was very much influenced by Scott Walker's singing style, especially around that time in the early 80s. I wouldn't say that Scott Walker was anyway forgotten, because he was still well known for his time with the Walker Brothers and all those hits, and he was something of a heartthrob. But Julian Cope was probably one of the first to draw people's attention to Scott's solo albums, Scott number 1, 2, 3 and 4. And the performance I've chosen is from Scott 4. I only have it on CD, I'm afraid, at the moment. I would like an original vinyl copy of Scott 4. But yeah, the song I've chosen is Boy Child. And that combination of Scott's very rich singing tone, that air of existentialism, which I'm sure he wallowed in a sense, with the dark glasses and singing Jacques Brel songs. But Boy Child is just such a gorgeous performance, especially that very atmospheric and eerie zither or dulcimer sound that just whips you over to Eastern Europe. Wonderful records, these. All of these solo albums, and one day I will have to investigate Scott's material after this, because he's very much admired as an experimental artist, and yet another one who we lost fairly recently. So there you go, Scott Walker, Boy Child from the album Scott 4. This next vocalist is Laura Nyro. Well, I used to think she was called Laura Nyro until I looked it up on trusty Wikipedia, and it is Laura Nyro, New York singer-songwriter, composer and pianist. She had very early success, I think probably still as a teenager, when she made her first album in 66 or 67 that was called More Than a New Discovery. And artists picked up on her songs, and they were covered by people at the time like the Fifth Dimension and Barbra Streisand, who had hits. Three Dog Night as well had hits with her songs. But her solo albums are something different, really. She had a 3-octave vocal range apparently, and her own solo albums much more personal than the songs she wrote for other people, and especially this album, which is her third album, New York Tenderberry by Laura Nyro. It's very intense, very stark, and I think it's probably the high point of her recording career. Most of her albums are very, very good though. The vocal style is sort of a mixture of pop, soul and folk, singer-songwriter style folk. This is a very, very dark record. The song I've chosen from this album is called Gibson Street, and she does show off in this vocal performance that range, that extraordinary range that Laura had. Just her and a piano. It's very spare backing, but there are some horns on here, some sort of soulful horns coming in and out. Fascinating record, really. So if you don't know Laura Nyro, I would encourage you to check her out. There are some pretty good best ofs around as well. So there you go, Laura Nyro, who I now will have to get used to calling Laura Nyro after all those years of calling her Laura Nyro. The next choice is Billy Mackenzie, the late Billy Mackenzie. I've just noticed that the majority of these singers which I've chosen for these 10 are no longer with us. They've died, and that's the case with Billy Mackenzie. I think it might have been suicide in the case of Billy Mackenzie. Anyhow, great singer, Scottish, was part of the duo The Associates, who came to prominence probably, I think, in the 80s, mid-80s, early 80s. I remember vividly seeing them on some late night Channel 4 programme performing this song, Party Fears 2. This is the 12-inch single of Party Fears 2. And it's the first time I'd heard of The Associates and the first time I'd seen The Associates. And it's quite a revelation, very original sounding band. You listen to the music, you can sort of place them in the 80s, but yeah, they made some very, very, very good albums, especially The Affectionate Punch. I think that's maybe the first one. White Car in Germany is a song I could have chosen, but Billy Mackenzie, I think, you can hear his influence by Bowie, particularly, tracks like Secret Life of Arabia, where Bowie is all over the place, going, up and down into falsetto and then down into baritone. And Billy Mackenzie had that range, but he took that wildness of the Berlin era Bowie and took it to the nth degree, really. Soaring falsetto, a very dramatic style, kind of a twinkle in his eye throughout, though there's some humour in here as well. Very, very original. Billy Mackenzie, shame he's no longer with us. And this is the 12-inch single, Party Fears 2. On to something different now. Judy Collins, American singer, very well known. She first came to people's notice as a folk singer in the 60s. I think, although she is a songwriter, she's very well known for doing cover versions and making quite big hits out of them, and interpreting songs by Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, people who are coming along, who she decided to do very, very good cover versions of. She has a very crystal clear voice, and she's not dead. She's still with us, unusual for this list. So I've chosen an album which I think was a big hit in 1967. She recorded for Elektra, to Judy Collins, and this is the album Wildflowers. And the big hit off this album was her cover version of Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. The arrangements on here are absolutely lovely, by Joshua Rifkin. But the track I've chosen for my favourite vocal performance by Judy Collins is another Joni Mitchell song, and it's Michael from Mountains, and it's the opening track on this Wildflowers album. Very, very nice. I'm going to end this list with Mark E. Smith, the only constant member of The Fall. Made many, many albums and singles over the years, going back to 1977. Of course, Mark E. Smith is no longer with us, but there's no one else like him. And volatile, written a few notes down here, belligerent vocal style. And this album that I've chosen to pick a vocal performance from is from rather a grim period of The Fall, early 80s, and in 1982 actually. Mark E. Smith made this album with the intention that it would be the very last thing that he would ever record. He was mightily fed up with the music press and not really being recognised. And the album is Hex Induction Hour. Recognise this kind of artwork because Pavement pinched this sort of deliberately ugly, scribbly album artwork later on. So, partly recorded in Iceland. Double drummer lineup on here as well. But yeah, Mark E. Smith just sounds so fed up on this. It's very misanthropic, it's very nihilistic, and the track I've chosen to end this list of vocal performances is Hip Priest, a tune that they would play many times during their career. I think it's just been a reissue of this, a double reissue, but this one is the original on Camera Records from '82. So that ends this very subjective collection of favourite vocal performances. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully my next video will be a little bit quicker to make and maybe a bit shorter and snappier. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for your subscriptions, especially. I'm now over the 100 mark, which is great. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.